I think we will wait just 30 seconds more or so before we start so everybody can join. Welcome. This is the beta version launch of the new national research infrastructure in Sweden called Demscore. You are all very welcome. Today we will give you an introduction for you to Demscore and its contents and what it can do for you. And we will hear from the different modules, the different databases that go into Demscore. We'll also hear from some of the core team who has been working on this for a long time, and they will also help guide you on how to use Demscore. Demscore is a new national research infrastructure in Sweden, and it will provide from today free access to harmonized data from several of the world's largest databases on democracy, environment, migration, social policy, conflict, and representation that can all be found in Sweden. These are the constituent and current members of Demscore, the partners who work together to make Demscore, and we'll hear from all of them today. All in all, in brief, Demscore collates and brings together 74 datasets at present, and there will be more, covering over 250 country units and over 20,000 variables. To give us an idea about this mass of data, we'll now hear from the research leaders of the different modules, and we'll start with UCDP Views and the Uppsala Conflict Data Program. Magnus.
Thank you, Stefan. So the Uppsala Conflict Data Program is the world's leading provider of conflict data. Was listed by The Guardian a few years back as one of the top 10 resources for development research, together with institutions like the World Bank, the OECD, the UNDP, the WHO, and so on. What we do is we provide or we map an intrastate conflict on an annual basis from 1946 onwards, and we also map organized violent events since 1989 in 3 categories, both state-based violence, that's wars and civil wars, non-state violence, that's conflicts between rebel groups or narco cartels and things like that, and one-sided violence, which is violence by an organized group, which can be a state or a non-state actor, against unarmed civilians, so those are massacres and genocides. And we bring to Demscore 20 different data sets, covering 500 variables, describing 8,500 conflicts, over 6,300 actors, and it contains over 350,000 events. In addition to that, we also produce a conflict encyclopedia, which contains interactive maps and graphs, and also textual descriptions of the different actors, the different conflicts, and the different variables, and also all of the 350,000 events. Next. And the Violence Early Warning System is a forecasting and risk assessment data provider that provides forecasting and risk assessment of UCDP organized violence, both on a country level and in grid squares, as you can see on the map on the right of Africa, the heat map. You can see the probability of violent events in December last year. And you can compare that to the map on the next slide of Africa for accuracy. But so Views provides this data. They also provide aggregations of UCDP event level data to grid cell format, which can be useful for studying things that's not necessarily follow political boundaries, like climate change and armed conflict, for example. To this release of the Demscore data, UCDP includes the UCDP pre-armed conflict data set that goes back to 1946 and describes all armed conflict, intrastate, interstate, also internationalized intrastate, and colonial wars. In addition to that, we have what we consider our core data, the georeferenced event data set, which describes in the three categories all the violent events that takes place in the world, and it's updated on a monthly basis. And then we also have the one-sided violence data set, which describes the massacres and the genocidal events. And we have the non-state conflict data set describing violence between non-state actors. We also provide data sets describing the whole conflict cycle. So we have an onset data set, or several actually. We have a conflict termination data set describing how conflicts end. We have the peace agreement data set that describes the various peace agreements. And that also includes, in the encyclopedia, we have all of the peace agreements in full text. So those are our core data. And in addition to that, there's a number of specialized data sets describing, for example, electoral violence, urban violence, and so on. So there's a rich palette of different conflict data that goes into Demscore. Thank you.
Sorry, pressing the wrong button. Thank you very much, Magnus, for that presentation. And now we quickly move over to the quality of government, COG. Axel.
Thank you. So at the COG Institute, we provide data on quality of government broadly. And what this entails is data on corruption and governance quality generally. And we provide societal indicators, so the correlates of COG broadly defined. Our mission is really about making data freely available and accessible. So we have been doing this for about more than a decade, and we do this through several data sets. And these can be broadly classified as those that are consisting of original data that we have collected ourselves and compilation data sets, those that we have compiled from other sources of data. Next slide, please. And to mention a few of those that will enter this exciting Demscore collaboration, we can mention the kind of flagship datasets, the COG Basic and Standard. Those are based on a nation year structure and consist of the very most used indicators out there for societal welfare or quality of government. So we have more than 2,000 variables and they are widely used. There's also more niche data sets focusing on a smaller number of units, such as the OECD countries or the most commonly used variables in COG Basic. So those are core data sets. Then we have other data sets that are also compilation data sets, such as the environmental indicators data sets for those interested in natural resource degradation across the globe, or the EU regional data sets, which is a compilation of mainly Eurostat statistics for the regions of the European Union. Moving on to the original data sets, we provide information on, for example, the European Quality of Government Index, which is an original survey data collection on the regions of Europe. And I think that's a nice complement, moving away from the nation structure. Then we have an expert survey, the COG expert survey, mainly tapping quality of government. And we have other data sets that are done by COG researchers. So in all, I think this is a very nice complement in the structure, and we provide data on quality of government. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me then say 2 words about V-Dem, or Varieties of Democracy. That's another module in this dataset. As many of you know, we collect indicators on varieties of democracy and providing indices of those, as well as indices on different components of democracy, as well as sort of adjacent things like public sector corruption and so on. And what we really collect is over 450 indicators, I think 483 by now, on a host of things that have to do with democracy, governance, human rights, judicial systems, and so on. All this go into the V-Dem data, to the Demscore collection of data sets, such as the Liberal Democracy Index displayed in this graph. And in total, V-Dem contributes with only over 30 million data points for the main V-Dem data set. There are also other adjacent data sets that are provided. The episodes of regime transformation, the V-Party data set with a lot of indicators on political parties, as well as the pandemic backsliding data set. Then we have Complab. Kenneth. Oh, Joachim, of course.
Thank you, Staffan. I'm replacing Kenneth Nelson from Stockholm University today as a representative of Complab. And Complab is a joint operation between Stockholm and Uppsala universities, and it's containing policy indicators. And I think this illustrates what Demscore can actually achieve by linking policy indicators to the kinds of conditions that you have been describing in your previous presentations around conflicts, about the development of the state, and about the development of democracy. So we have 3 basic components in Complab. The first is SPIN, the Social Policy Indicators database, which has a long history as an attempt to build indicators on social rights, and with a fairly broad comparative angle, also historically dating back to the 1930s, and now encompassing more than 30 countries, and also going globally, I would argue. It's containing GRACE, which is about environment and climate policy. Governing the Anthropocene is what is at what's in focus in this project. And then thirdly, we have a migration policy database, which is based here in Uppsala, which is the youngest sort of sibling in this trio, and where we have indicators not only on the sort of rights of migrants, but also on how states try to regulate migration. And the way we see that this enables an analysis of institutions and institutional configurations, how policies in different policy areas are linked with each other. But it also enables us, as we try to illustrate in this graph, that we can study how institutions affect various kinds of outcomes, ranging from things like living conditions of people, but also their attitudes and behaviors. And this is also important for understanding the sort of political dynamics that are affecting how institutions evolve and develop, because that's, of course, related to the underlying, not only democratic, but also other political structures. So thank you for making it possible for me to say something about Complab.
Thank you so much, Joachim. And next, Torbjörn, please, Repdem, Representative Democracy in Europe.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have data on governments, specifically cabinets and cabinet ministers. And then this is basically right now European data. So how are governments formed? How did they terminate, and who participates? It's based on coalition information literature, and so the main unit is cabinet, but mostly we're analyzing coalitions. There's one thing that is specific about this data set is that it covers the entire life cycle. So we start with the formation period and how the governments form, and then they how they govern, and then how they the duration and termination. So it's a new set of variables that cover. The literature that used to be that's only the formation and the termination, the marriage and the divorce. We're trying to fill in the blanks in between, and that means we have also the participants in governments are political parties in general. So we have about 550 political parties and independents, and we can analyze in terms of how they create stability or how they create crisis. Currently, we have 28 countries, and then fairly update for Western Europe. We're updating right now also Central Eastern Europe. We have until 2014, and we're about to launch data on to 2021 and see how European countries are becoming more similar or not. You can next then. This is just one example of the variables that we have. It's a lot of interest sometimes about government formation, and then this data, it's a summary of how long does it take to form a government. And we can see that Sweden, Denmark, and United Kingdom doesn't take very long. But on the other hand, it does take a long time, usually in the Netherlands and Belgium. Now, the last one in Sweden was very long, and then so this is also data there's subject to change, and then it has you wonder if it has to do with fragmentation or expectations or so. But that's something we're trying to explore and build further on. The next step is to complete the data on Central Eastern Europe, and then also include countries that are parliamentary democracies outside of Europe, such as New Zealand, maybe Israel, Australia, Canada. So that's where we're heading. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Torbjörn. And then last but not least, Jan, please, Historical Data Archive.
Thank you very much. Good to see you here, everybody. So this is a newly launched initiative at Stockholm University called the Historical Data Archive, or HData for short. This is basically providing, the idea is to provide data on all the other things you heard about before during the presentation, but going further back in time. Next, please. So if you, for example, are interested in conflict data, but want to go before 1946, HData will be the place to turn to. If you're interested in democracy, going back before 1900, where V-Dem originally started, we already have integrated something called historical V-Dem that goes all the way back to 1789. So the idea is to extend time series further back in time of other kinds of data modules. But this does not only involve already existing data sets, but there is also novel data collection going on within this project. So to give you one example, and this grew out of another project that I had at Lund University, something we have in this data set is the information capacity data set. So there's a lot of interest in state capacity these days. One dimension, important dimension of that is the capacity of the state to collect information about its population and its territory. And this data set looks at some of these particular institutions that can help the state to do this, such as, can the state run a census? Does it have a statistical agency? Does it have a civil and population registers? And can it actually issue a statistical yearbook covering its own population and territory? And we have this data for 85 polities from going all the way back to 1750, actually. So maybe you were asking yourselves, why should you turn to history? Aren't we all interested in understanding current day problems? Aren't we social scientists, not historians? I could give you 3 very short reasons for why you might be wanting to look at history. The first is just that some institutions are very, very slowly moving. and you have to go back in time in order to find change, particularly at the country level. The second reason is that some of the scope conditions that apply, that are sort of constant if you look at the world today, are actually moving if you go back in time. Think about the international system, for example, how many great powers there are. That's something that has changed quite a lot over time, but then you have to go back in time in order to capture that variation. Finally, there are a lot of reasons if you're interested in identifying causal explanations for other outcomes to go back in time. It's easier to compare a unit with itself over a long stretch of time than it is to compare a lot of units at the same time point. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And after this introduction to all the data sets that go into this, let me also mention that this, as a national research infrastructure, is principally funded by the Swedish Research Council, and then co-funding provided in equal measure by the 4 participating universities. We are all very grateful for the support. There is a steering committee for Demscore with 6 members that are in this picture. We are very grateful that they have agreed to serve on the steering committee for Demscore for the coming 3 years. There is also an executive committee consisting of the research leaders for the different modules, the data sets that you have heard about, who direct the activities on a more day-to-day basis. And finally, there is a core team. They're really important people who are doing the job, except me in this picture. You could delete that. I'm not important, but the rest of the people are important here. Josephine Pernes as Program and Finance Director, Stephen Wilson, Assistant Professor at Brandeis University, but also Chief Technical Officer for this project, and Lisa Gastaldi, Program Manager, Johannes von Römer, who's the Data Scientist, and the 2 assistants, Melina Leitman and Aaron Manis. We're now going to hear from Johannes von Römer and Stephen Wilson about how all these data sets are brought together and how you can then access the data and get your specialized data sets done, drawing on whichever combination of data you want. That's the launch of the beta version of Demscore. And let me now stop sharing my screen and ask Johannes and Stephen to start sharing the second part of the presentation. Thank you.
Yes, hello. Okay, and welcome to Demscore. We have a website where the data sets are available, and down the road we will also have graphing tools available, as well as research created using the Demscore data, and also further documentation on how we merged all this together. All in all, this is freely accessible data, 20,000 plus variables across a broad range of topics that you can choose. As of now, there are 74 data sets in Demscore, and for example, V-Dem country year, COG standard, and these data sets are also available in their original form. That means unaltered, so that if you want the original data set, you can also download that through Demscore in all of those variables. But we also we first searched a unique set of units. So like some data sets might have similar types of units, and identified those. For example, there's a V-Dem country year unit and a COG country year unit. And data sets can be expressed in their primary output unit. That means there is no data quality loss. This is the primary unit for a specific data set. But data sets can also be translated to a secondary output unit. That means it is transformed or matched to be expressed to another output unit, which requires translations, and that's where the bulk of the work is. So as of now, we have data set and output unit combinations, a number 305. And matching means, let's say we have V-Dem country year definitions and quality of government country year definitions. And then we need to match, where do these definitions match, where are there small clashes, and what is the decision that we do in such a case of a clash? Do we merge two countries together where the country definition varies slightly, or do we decide to not merge this together? And this is all documented. Aggregations and disaggregations occur when we transform a data set to another type of unit. Let's say from country date to country year, we might aggregate the scores using functions using sum or average score or last score per year. Or disaggregations, we might often duplicate country year scores to a country date level where we use the same, often duplicate the score for several dates. So all of these are decisions that need to be done in order to express a data set in several output units, which will help us that when you choose a specific output unit and let's say a main data set of interest, that you can then choose many variables from many other data sets that have an originally different unit. And the respective sub project members in Demscore decide on the methodology for their individual output unit. Now, if we have more than 70 data sets and a lot of output units, that creates a lot of different combinations if we want to express as many data sets and as many output units as possible. So we're using a small trick, meaning we reuse translation functions or paths. That means basically, if we have a translation from one output unit to another, let's say V-Dem country year unit to quality of government country year unit, and we have another data set that is, let's say, V-Dem country date, translated also to V-Dem country year, then we can, to go from the V-Dem country date data set to the COG country year data set, we can reuse the function that already exists that translates between V-Dem country year and COG country year. So with relatively few unit translation functions, we can achieve many dataset output unit combinations. We have reference documents that document everything we do. We will also publish the code for full transparency. And in the download interface, you get an auto-generated codebook based on the variable selection. The main reason for this is that it's a lot of variables. And if you select 20 or 100 variables, then you will receive a codebook which only has those 20 or 100 codebook entries. But there are also some project-specific codebooks. Those are very, very big. That's more for, okay, if you really want a codebook that has all the variables of a member project, that is also available on our website. And we have a methodology document that details our methodology in terms of how did we get from data sets to specific output units. This is an example of a standardized codebook entry. We basically harmonized all the metadata across the different project members and to display it in a concise standardized format. This is a specific codebook section, for example, on quality of government with specific variable entries. And note that it's there are long tags that basically is the variable tag plus a dataset tag as a prefix. That is necessary because if you select variables from many different data sets, occasionally the tags might be the same and there's a clash, and then we have to prefix the dataset specific tag. And in some cases, we also modified the original tag a tiny bit, meaning remove special characters and turn into small cap. For the beta release, what have we done is we finished the data pipeline that merges together data sets from data set to specific output unit that also have data pipelines that merge the metadata, and we have that now all in our database that it's easy to retrieve. And we also have the dataset translation methodology, and we also developed the website and the download interface. we currently call this a beta version. Why do we call it the beta version? We are still in the process of fine-tuning our methodology so that later on this year, we will have a full release where we then, with full confidence, can say, yes, this is data in a merged way that can be used for publications. And so we welcome feedback. If you find anything weird or if you disagree with the methodology, please tell us. And we basically want to improve this. That is what we want. We want the highest quality data. In the download interface, you first choose a main data set of interest, and based on that, an output unit is recommended to you. And then you can select from many data sets, numerous variables, and you will retrieve an output file, a compressed zip file, which contains your data in either CSV data or R data file formats. It contains an auto-generated codebook and the methodology document describing our methodology, as well as you will receive a download ID, which is a unique identifier for each download. The reason is for replicability, so that later on that you can share this download ID with other users, let's say in your paper, and later a user can type this download ID in our download interface and will receive exactly the same data as the original downloader did. I will now pass on to Stephen Wilson, our Chief Technical Officer.
Thanks, Johannes.
1 second, I need to mute myself.
Yeah, just don't talk and then you're muted. So I wanted to walk you through really quickly the first version of the web interface that we've put up that's currently on the Demscore website for y'all to use. And first, just some basics in terms of the approach that we took. We tried to take a modular approach because, as you can guess from what Johannes explained to you, this is a ludicrously powerful and a tool that ends up being very complicated, where there's an infinite different ways that you could decide to merge together these different data sets in different ways. And so instead of making one gargantuan, ludicrously complicated interface that would then confuse everybody who tried to use it if we stuck all the options on one page, we took a modular approach where we would take individual use cases for how do you actually want to merge the data together, and we built individual simple interfaces for those. And as we figure out better use cases and new use cases, in particular ones that our users recommend to us during this beta phase, we will add new interfaces onto here, new modular ways for you to merge together this different data. So the entry point when you click on the data link on the Demscore website is this basic menu right now, which just prompts you for how is it do you want to select the data that you're going to merge together. So first we're going to go ahead and just click on by variable, which is the simplest way of doing it. This is sort of the basic way where you individually select every single variable you want in sort of your bespoke custom data set. The first thing you do, as Johannes referenced before, is you indicate your main data set of interest. And we have all of the different data sets in the database there. And this then tells you what the default output unit is, i.e. the recommended way that most people would decide to merge onto this data set. But you're allowed to select any of the different output units. So perhaps you're interested in the COG time series, but you know that you really want the output unit to be V-Dem country year, just because of your substantive interests. You can select that. Then there's a file format drop-down box that allows you to select CSV, R, or Stata, whichever you prefer to work with. And the include unit columns checkbox is basically telling it whether to include the basic universal columns for that output unit. For instance, the country name and the year are the two kind of really common unit columns across all of the different output units. And one thing to sort of note at this point, one of the very cool features of this is that as long as you select the same output unit, you can select any different variables over and over again, generate 100 different data sets through this tool, and all of them will have exactly the same number of rows that are in the same order, which means you can do column merging or cut and pasting if you're in the spreadsheet world without worrying about doing any merging whatsoever. So if down the road you realize, oh, I forgot I wanted to control for GDP, which we always do, and then we always forget to download. You can just download GDP from here and merge it on. And you don't have to worry about any merging by country, year, and country and year and all of that kind of stuff. It's all perfectly set up for you to do column merging. And then there's a nice full text search field down at the bottom there where you can start typing variable names across all of our data sets, including by their individual data tag. And once you're done, you can click the Generate Dataset button, and it pops up for a second with a nice little, and on the website, the little spinny thing is actually spinning. We didn't bother making the animated GIF in the PowerPoint. And after a few seconds, when it has a chance to actually construct your data set, it then pops up for you a download button. We do it this way simply because some of these data sets are so large that if you came in here and said, I want all the data from all the data sets, we're actually not going to stop you from doing that. You can generate a giant file if you want. It'll take 30 seconds or so to generate your download. And then once you do that, you click download and it downloads your zip file. If we go back to the main menu now and pick one of the more advanced selections, the by codebook section on the right side there, this gives a slightly different view of how to combine and merge different data sets together. Now, in this case, we're going to select entire codebook sections from data sets at once. So we still pick the output unit because we still have to specify what is sort of the destination merge formatting that we want. We still pick the file format. We still pick whether or not we want those generic unit columns, the country and the year and such, at the start of the file. And the reason why you might not want to select that is if you are selecting because you just want to column merge it later, you don't need to actually have those because you don't actually need them for merging, as we said. And then down below, you can search the different names of the code books in a dropdown, and you can scroll through all of them. If you search for it, it searches for the name of the individual code book. So for instance, in this example here, I started typing digital since I'm with the Digital Society project, so digital stuff is close to my heart. And you can see that there's entire sections of different code books from COG, from V-Dem that have to do with digital. And then when we select a few of them, you'll see different code books are selected from across the different data sets we have. And then when we click generate data set, it again generates a data set. And this one would be a resultant much larger data set than when we just selected 5 or 6 variables. But again, even if you generate a data set from this codebook method versus doing it from the individual variable selection method, all the rows are ordered and in the same length. So you can merge them all together without even thinking about it. The last thing I want to show you is, so however you decide to generate data sets on here, on the last page, when it actually gives you your download file, it will give you a unique identifier for your data set, as Johannes indicated. And this is saved in our database, your exact variable selections, everything you put in the menu. So that way it can instantly replicate whatever you happen to have downloaded in the past. So if you click on the by downloader ID instead, and then type in, or presumably cut and paste in, since unique identifiers are rather long to type by themselves, you can go ahead and just put that in and hit retrieve, and it will go ahead and download your data set that you generated before, which again, this is fantastic either because you happen to delete your downloaded file, which I've done on more than one occasion when researching, or alternately because you want to have good transparency and replicability. And you can pass that out, go ahead and put it up as a permanent URL in articles that you publish, and you're good to go for providing replicability. So what I'm really excited about here, just kind of my use case, the reason I got excited about this project myself was every single data project or research project that I have has the inevitable super convoluted R script that's written at the beginning to merge together all the databases where you're getting your control variables, which leads to you having an infinite variety of little custom if statements as you figure out that V-Dem uses Russia, COG uses the Soviet Union, and the merging doesn't work if you're just doing raw from the files. And this solves so many problems for me going forward that I'm really happy that we were able to get the project put together. So I'll hand it back to Johannes to talk a little bit more about the plans for the full release, but I look forward to all your questions about what we've done and where we're going.
Yes, so for later this year, we're planning a full release to go away from beta to a full release. And what that means is that we will have more data sets available, translated to more different output units, where we will also have a merge report, which will give a percentage score that, you know, how well did it work to transfer this data set or this variable into that output unit? How well did countries match? How many observations did we lose? Those kind of things. And we're also planning more user choice when downloading the variables. So maybe some variables will be available several times, and you can say, I want this either aggregated by mean or by the last observation, think per country day, per country year, if you aggregate from country date to country year, or I want the average score across the days going from country date to country year, so that for many variables, we want to allow the choice of, well, more aggregation methodologies per variable. Until the full release, we will have a fine-tuned methodology that we say, yes, this is a good methodology that can be used for scientific publications. And we're also planning to tweak our download interface so that maybe more fine-grained data can be selected, maybe a specific time frame or a specific set of countries or a specific area, for example. Demscore plans to update the data on a regular basis. A lot of the data sets that go into Demscore have release cycles where the data sets get published or updated once a year. This will be translated into Demscore as well, and some data sets might be updated on a monthly basis. This will also get translated into Demscore. So this is not a one-off thing and then we forget it. This will continue in the future and will be updated. But the details on that are still need to be decided. Okay, thank you very much. And do you have any questions?
Thank you, Johannes and Stephen, and thanks to all the other presenters as well. And thank you to all participants for staying with us. And now we have time for questions and answers. You can use the Q&A function in Zoom to post your question if you want, or you can also try and use the raise hand function, and in best case I will also see that hand showing up here in the window, and you can ask your question live. But we have a first question. Will every data set be translated to every other data set in the long run? The answer to that is yes. It's already translated across all of these data sets. And that means that, yeah, you can't, it's not only downloading, say, COG and UCDP data or so, but also, as the question here is about child benefits in Europe and battle-related deaths, you can combine those kinds of data using the Demscore, and it will translate the units, it will translate the data and merge it together on whichever unit you want, whether it's country date or it's grid field in Africa or any other possibility here.
Yeah, I would like to say that some few combinations will be excluded because they will not be able to, we won't be able to merge them due to the different nature of data, but that is very few combinations.
Yeah, I was gonna exactly ask you to comment on that, Johannes, and maybe you can give a little bit more detail. In general, the question is also, there's actually several questions in this one question. How are decisions made on whether a translation between data sets makes sense or when it does not? So the general methodology we have applied is that the core team here with with Johannes and Stephen and Lisa and the assistants, have used their best wisdom to suggest whether a translation makes sense or not and how it should be done. And then that has been reviewed by the teams of each module. So if a translation question is about how to translate, say, Repdem data on UCDP or Complab data on COG, well, in the first instance, then UCDP knows their data best, and they have then reviewed and answered how other data should be merged onto them, their data. And so the same with Complab or Repdem or COG, historical and V-Dem. And as you said, Johannes, there are a few instances when it's absolutely not possible or it doesn't make sense, but that's very rare. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Johannes, or anybody else here.
No, yeah, I mean, there are some use cases where, for example, you have two data sets on a select few countries, and these number of countries don't overlap, for example, right? Then that can't be merged by country. So there's like, and in some rare cases, the units are so extremely different that we can't find a reasonable methodology to merge them. But most data sets work very well in merging and expressing them in different output units.
Yes. Then we have another question. Or did anybody want to come in here from the... No? Okay. Lutz Geschwind. Would you like to post your question live? Then Nasifa can promote you to speak to us and post your question live. Lutz, would you like to?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Hello, everyone. Hi. My question was that now in the current format, a user would need to select a data set first and then the variable from the data set, right? So my question is whether it will be, if there in the future at some point in time, there will be a function where users can use search for a certain topic, for example, or try to identify variables that are similar across data sets without selecting a data set first. Thank you.
It actually kind of works like that already. So when you select data set on that page that I was showing you, that's not limiting your selection to the variables from that data set. That's just allowing you to specify what output format that you want. So you can still search across all of the different variables from all the data sets on that page. It is a little confusing the way that we've set it up that way. I can see that now. We probably should label that a little better. But the way it works is you can search across all of them.
Yeah, and the searching by codebook is one way of doing that, because if you enter a keyword there, it was digital, but it could be, say, civil liberties, or it could be deaths, or it could be policy, migration policy, or something. Then it will pull up from all the data sets as well and give you suggestions. But yes, it's a good pointer that we could make the download interface searchable in additional ways that could make it more intuitive. Lutz, did you want to follow up, or?
Oh, thank you. That was perfect explanation. Yeah, a little bit of specification on the interface that would be good to clarify that. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Apparently the presenters here presented everything so clearly and detailed that...
You have a hand up.
Oh, there's a hand up there. Sophie Blombeck, please. Nasifa can promote you to speaker here so you can ask your question in person. Yes, Sophie. Please unmute yourself.
This will probably help.
Yeah.
Yes, great. Thanks for the presentation and really impressive project all around. I was just wondering, is it possible to sort of search the code books in some way before you're downloading the material in order to find relevant variables? I'm thinking, for example, if you have a student who's interested in writing something about, you know, and who's not intimately familiar with the data sets, is there a way you can sort of look up the variables before you get them as a download, or is the best way to sort of select all your variables and then get your data and your auto-generated codebook?
You know, that's a great idea. One thing that we might want to look into doing is, because we have all the data at our digital fingertips from a certain perspective, is that, for instance, on the search, when you say type in GDP, for instance, and you get like 30 responses because GDP is in a bunch of data sets, some is per capita, some's PPP, some's not, and actually have, as you select them, maybe have a window over on the right side of the screen that then gives you the codebook entry for the item that you're mousing over. That might be a good additional way to give more information right up front. But like you said, the flip side, as it works right now, you could view that straight in the codebook as you download it.
Thanks.
Yeah, as of now, we also have long form code books that contain all variables for a specific project member that are available on our website, so that you can then search that as well. But I think down the road, as Stephen said, we will have like a codebook searchable thing on our website as well.
Yes. I'm sharing my screen now and hope that you can see it. As of now, here you see all the sections of the code books that you can search, but this could easily be extended so that for each if you wonder about what military background section in the H data foreign minister data set, what variables are there, it could easily be extended so you see all the variables in a tree down there, for example. And then it would, all the 20,000 variables would be at your fingertips. Right. Yes. Oh, Adam Musawi. You had your hand up in the beginning, I'm being told, but that I missed it. I don't know if you want to come in. Let's see if I can. If you want to come in and still have a question, please pose it.
Thank you. It was clarified by the professor. Thank you so much.
Okay. No further details needed?
No, it's fine. It's been clarified. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being here today.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Well, then let me ask if Stephen or Johannes have anything in addition you want to mention to all the participants before we close.
I'd just say that we're really excited to get any feedback from everyone about their actual use cases. So even just on this conversation now, we had 2, 3, 4 different, hey, can I do this? And we say, huh, yeah, that'd actually be pretty easy to do. And it makes the interface a lot better. So any feedback you have, any questions that you have, please send them to us. And we've built it in intentionally very modularly, so that way we can build it out to as many different use cases and ideas as the academic community and policy communities can think of.
Thank you, Stephen. And then let me also ask all the research leaders here from the different modules of Demscore, if any one of you have a final additional word, something we forgot to mention that you think we should mention, please go ahead now. Joachim, please.
I just want to say that this has been really exciting, and I want to applaud the work you've done in the core team of Demscore. So this is, as far as I've seen, it's a great beginning. So really exciting to see what this is bringing to comparative research. Thank you.
Thank you, Joachim. Very generous. And Magnus.
Yeah, no, I want to echo that, but also I was wondering, maybe you could say a few words about visualization tools that, although they are not in the beta launch, what we have in mind for that.
Of course. Stephen, do you want to comment on that first?
Sure. So our plan is going forward in the next few months, now that we've got the downloader up in the first place, to be able to start doing exactly that. So now that we have the ability to sort of, the downloader was the initial piece that we needed, because that was the core piece of infrastructure that does all of the merging. So we can't cross data set visualize until the merging problem has been solved. And so we've got the merging problem solved. So at this point now we can start building out visualization tools. We have some initial plans for doing some of the basic sort of things you might expect, like time series, line graphs, that sort of stuff. Each of the member organizations has a suite of visualization tools on their site already doing their individual data set platforms. So our vision is to sort of be able to draw pieces from what works for best from all of them and put them together over the next few months, 6 months or so, in order to have some good visualization tools as well.
Thank you, Stephen. So in very short time here, there will also be visualization tools available online in a variety. We like varieties, at least I do. A variety of ways of visualizing the data, from line graphs to maps and correlation plots and whatnot. On that note, let me say thank you to all presenters who have helped present V-Dem and Demscore and its constituent parts here today, and the core team who's worked so hard to take us to where we are today, and for also Stephen and Johannes helping present Demscore here today. And thank you to all the participants who have attended today's launch of the beta version of Demscore. And thanks for asking very good questions that will be helpful for the future work to make this thing even more better and even more exciting. Thank you all. And we now bring this launch to a close. Thank you.
Thank you.